You're listening to the Money Pig Podcast, brought to you by Goodwin Investment Advisory, where our mission is to lead people to financial peace, independence, and generosity. Again, I'm here. I'm your host, Reed Trigo, and today I am joined by certified financial planner, Joe Beckford, here from GIA. Joe, great to have you here.
Reed, it's so good to have you.
Yes, wonderful. I'm glad to be back.
Great to be here.
Yeah. So we got a listener question, but then you and I got talking. We're like, wow, we've actually both heard this question aside from a client question.
Like recently.
Recently. Yeah, within the last 2 weeks. So we thought this is actually a frequently asked question. We should probably talk about it. And I think we can be pretty helpful for people.
Well, I hope so. We'll give it a shot.
We will. This is what we tried to do. Right? Okay. So here's a question we got in an email. It's been a year. Oh, no, I won't start there. I have a question regarding my husband's employer-sponsored 401k and how to handle it as he prepares to leave his job in a couple of weeks. He does not plan on going to a new employer, and we'd like to decide what to do with the funds. It's not a substantial amount, only $28,000. And I think that they're in their late 20s, early, maybe 32, 28, 32, something like that. Okay. So I thought, great question. A lot of people have them. I personally had a little 401k through a job many moons ago. This was the mid 90s.
Wow. That was a lot of moons ago.
Many moons. And I kind of search missingmoney.com or whatever that thing is every once in a while, because I think it's still out there somewhere. Probably worth tens of dollars.
You orphaned hundreds of dollars somewhere.
I think I did. I think so. So people shouldn't do that. Like, even if they think it's an unsubstantial amount of money, well, $28,000 isn't, first of all.
Yeah, not inconsequential at all. It takes a long time to save $28,000.
Yeah, it sure does. So let's talk through the options here. And this probably doesn't only apply to a 401k, but also some other retirement plans, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
Tell me about those.
So regular old for-profit companies typically would have like a 401k plan, right? Big companies offer those. But then there's people who work in education, people who work in the healthcare sector, people who work in nonprofits. Typically, they'll have like what's called a 403B. Mm-hmm. It's really just IRS, different tax code, but it looks, feels, smells like a 401k. So for all practical purposes, it is a 401k. They act the same. There's a 457 that also state and local employees have. It's similar to that. It's a nice benefit if you get it. Sometimes you'll see firefighters or something like that may have those kinds of plans. A little less common, but they look and feel the same. I think the question is, if you're leaving your employer, right? Mm-hmm. What do I do with that 401k?
Yeah,
do I leave it there?
Right.
So one thing I always tell folks is, you're leaving that employer. Why are you leaving your money behind with that employer?
That's true. I didn't even think about it, because they do have the option to just leave it there.
You could leave it there. And to your point, years from now, you may forget about it. Mm-hmm. And who's managing that money, and who's making the investment choices, and how much are you paying? And the answer is, you don't know any of those questions anymore of where that money's just sitting there. So I always tell people, like, you left for a reason, take your money with you.
Yeah, that seems smart.
Yeah.
Okay. So then in this case, he's not going to take a new job. Maybe he's starting a business or whatever he's doing. So let's take his example. What does he do with that money?
Great question. And
cash it out and buy Bitcoin.
Oh, I was going to say buy a Tesla. But
you could do that too.
Buy Bitcoin.
I don't think it's enough for it. It's not enough for a Tesla, and it's not enough for one Bitcoin at this point.
It is not.
We both have bad ideas.
And to be fair, I'm not a crypto guy, so that wasn't going to be my idea anyway. So you have a lot of choices, right? So if you're going to another job, one of your choices is maybe your new employer is going to have an employer-sponsored plan. You could roll it into that plan as well. Certainly a viable option. You could open up your own retirement account and roll it into that. Then you're faced with, well, what kind of retirement account is that? And that depends on one of two things. Is the money in there pre-tax, or is the money in there Roth? So if you've had a 401k and you've been adding money Roth, and your employer has been matching you, they probably haven't been adding Roth. They've been adding pre-tax.
Right.
So you've got these two different buckets going on inside your 401k. You've got some Roth money growing tax-free. You've got some pre-tax money growing tax-deferred. Now you're going to leave your employer and you want to roll your account out. You actually need two accounts. You need a Roth IRA to receive the Roth money. You need an IRA to receive the pre-tax money.
Not confusing at all.
Not confusing at all, but it's actually not that bad.
I agree.
It's really only two accounts.
I agree.
Yeah. So you open you could roll that into the two accounts. If you roll it into your other employer-sponsored plan, as long as they have Roth, which I think is the law now, actually, so they could take it all. But again, you still have two buckets: Roth bucket, pre-tax bucket.
So Roth goes to Roth, whether that portion always goes to either a Roth new 401k or a Roth IRA.
Right.
Traditional goes to traditional.
Or you could just cash it out and take a distribution, right, Reed?
Yeah, you could
just take it all.
That you could.
Yeah.
There's penalties for that, though, if you're under 59 and a half.
There are. Plus, well, you and I were talking about this earlier. Like, why would you do that? Almost never. Almost never. What did you? If you're doing that, that's extreme. And there are reasons you can do that, and you can avoid penalties for doing that. By the way, you're going to pay income tax either way, whatever it is. Even if you're avoiding an extra penalty, what you're avoiding is the 10% extra penalty for doing that. But you're still paying income tax. You don't get out of that.
That's right. And we were saying you can pull that money out in a hardship without the penalty. And that hardships are like your
like extreme medical bills.
Yeah.
You know, you've had a tree fall in the house and you've got no other way to fix your house. You need to fix your house.
Funeral expenses.
You've got a funeral, a funeral of a loved one that you've got to cover and pay for. But the rules are really harsh around them, and you can only take exactly, like you got to show receipts for exactly what the amount is. And like I said, you're still going to pay tax on it.
So if you get to that hardship circumstance, I mean, what we would say is you're fighting the fires closest to the barn at that point.
You are, right? And in an ideal world.
What do they say? What do they say in Texas?
We used to say, you're burning the furniture to keep warm.
Yeah, that's right.
And remember, when you burned up your chair to keep warm, when you come back later, there's nothing to sit on.
No.
That's right. So what do you do? And that talks to opportunity cost, right? So if you do that scorched earth and you take that money out, you're losing all that growth potential. And believe me, it took you a long time to put that money together most of the time. So
Yep. And considering this young couple, say 30 years old, they're looking at 35 years worth of growth or 30 years worth of growth before they would want to pull it out anyway. Right. And 30 years on $28,000 is substantial.
For sure. I mean, if you invest it well, even if you invest it modestly, you're going to realize 6-8% a year on that money. Think of what that compound interest looks like. That's the difference between you're able to retire and you're not.
Yeah, that's
Honestly.
right. That's right. Oh man, that's great.
Anyway, so we talked about that, but going into, so either your employer-sponsored plan or your IRAs are the way to go, right?
Yep. And so then once that money gets in there, let's go with the IRA route. Okay. The money's transferred in. You'd probably do like a rollover IRA. I don't know if all the custodians call it that.
Right. Either a traditional or a rollover would get the job done either way.
But as long as you get the process started, once you get to that point, customer service at Fidelity, Vanguard, Schwab, yada, yada, all these companies, we favor Fidelity just because I'm most familiar with it because I have accounts there.
Yeah.
Right.
And full disclosure, that's who we use here.
Sure.
So we like Fidelity.
So I can navigate their sites. But once it's in there, once the money's in there, I think people sometimes think, well, my money is invested in a 401k. Yes, it is. That's like the vehicle, but now you got to put contents in the vehicle, right? So you got to invest it in some stocks, mutual funds, crypto ETFs.
You got to buy something. You got to buy something because
Yep.
if you don't buy anything, it's in cash.
So how do we tell them how it should be invested?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, and that's like the layup setup, right? So that's what we do here. So if it makes sense for you to hire a professional to manage your money, if it's a substantial enough that you can diversify it and it's worth it and you get value out of it, then that's the kind of thing we do. Great. So we do that in concert with you. What if it's a small amount of money in your case? These young couple just starting, $28,000 is all they've got. Probably doesn't make sense to pay a professional to invest that for you. So now you're looking at investing it yourself. You don't have that knowledge. What do I do? We always tell people just think about how aggressive you want to be. A 28-year-old can afford to be pretty aggressive. So probably don't even need to worry about bonds. And I'd be looking at like a large cap growth mutual fund or two.
Split it between two and let it ride.
And be done.
Yeah.
If you want to cover the whole stock market, then take one large cap growth, take one that's like small cap growth, and just be done.
And people worry about this. And maybe they should, but okay, let's say you're 30 years old, you have $28,000, you're going to put it in a retirement account. If you make a mistake at this point, you have so many years to make up for it, right?
For sure.
It's not a giant problem. But if you had $2.8 million or $280,000, then your mistakes aren't in the hundreds of dollars anymore. They're in the thousands and thousands of dollars.
Exactly.
Right. And that's why people at that point engage our services.
Right.
Okay.
And to your point, you've got a lot of time. Imagine I've got $2.8 million with this situation. Maybe it's more like the $280,000 with this situation, but I still have a 30-year time horizon. Making the right move makes me crazy rich, and making the wrong move keeps me right about where I am now.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Okay, so we took the 401k money and rolled it into an IRA. Talked about that. But that option is there, not in this questioner's case, but the option is there. If you go to a new employer who has a 401k, you can take your old 401k and roll it into the new 401k. We already talked about that. What are the pluses and minuses of doing that?
Great question. So if it's not a ton of money and you don't feel comfortable investing yourself, which is an inexpensive way to do it, you could put it in your new plan. Why would you do that? Well, one, you like your plan. You think it's a good plan. Maybe your employer is matching you at a good clip. You've got a lot of fun choices. That sounds like a pretty good plan. Okay.
Fund choices or fun choices? You have fun choices.
Yes. You have fund choices.
Good.
Right. I've seen lots of plans that have like 3 fun choices, and you're like, well, it's not a very robust plan. But if you've got a pretty robust plan that allows you to pick what would be a relatively good diversified strategy, then sure, maybe you just go with that.
Yeah. And you see like large cap growth, small cap growth funds. You see a lot of target date retirement funds, which are not evil, I don't think, for people starting out like this.
Sure. They tend to be a little conservative, but
True.
they're certainly not evil. They get you diversified. And I tell people, if you really don't know what to buy the target date fund. Maybe look ahead 5 years above where you are on your target date fund, just because it probably is a little more conservative than you would be if you were doing it on your own. You'd roll it into the 401k because, one, it consolidates stuff, right? You don't have lots of accounts everywhere. Like all my stuff is in this one account. You know where it is. You're investing in it. I mentioned the match. Just know that when you roll something from another plan into your 401k, you're not going to get matched on that. Your new employer is only matching what you make. So you're not getting the double bonus on that. But you roll it in there, it gets all invested the same. That part would be good, as long as there are good choices. And most plans have pretty good choices. And most plans have relatively low expense ratios, but that's one thing to look at too. The funds that you're going to buy, what's the expense ratio on the fund?
Nice.
But there are some rules on 401ks that are different, right? So if in a 401k, for instance, if you're retired, if you're at least 55, you can take a distribution and you don't incur that 10% penalty. Without a hardship, you can take a distribution at 55. If it's an IRA, it's 59.5. If you're working there, and again, you have a hardship, you have a loan as an option out of a 401k. You do not have that option as an IRA.
That's right. But that's one of those other hardship, like fighting the fires closest to the barn.
Exactly. I almost never counsel anybody to take a loan from their 401k.
Right.
That has to be one of your last options. But it's better than taking the distribution, if that's your choice.
That's right. Or living on the street, if that's your other choice.
If that's your other choice, it's for sure better than that.
Yeah. All right.
So there are a couple of rules that are different.
Interesting. Awesome. Well, good. What else should we know about this, Joe? Did I miss anything?
So I would say probably, let's just wrap up like what's the ideal situation, right? Mm-hmm. So if I feel comfortable investing myself, even just buying total stock market index fund, if I feel like I can do that and I could open up a Roth and I can open up an IRA, that's going to be your cheapest way to go, least expensive way to go. I think I would do that. If I don't have that confidence level of doing that, I could roll it into my own. I think putting it in my employer-sponsored plan would probably be my next best option. Unless if it's a substantial amount of money, I would look at hiring a professional to help you out.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing we do.
Again, the mistakes that can be made in a rollover situation, especially because people will be like, I don't know, send me a check. Oh, I sat on it for 60 or 90 days. And here's this money I got from my 401k. I should probably put it somewhere. And by that point, the IRS wants their share.
You brought up a great point that I didn't even think about a second ago. You're right. So you get a check. Your employer sends you a check, right?
Yeah.
You've got 60 days to roll that in and not pay tax on it. If you wait, guess what? That's
Bingo.
Taxable income.
That's right.
You. And that could be a large amount of money in 1 year. And that was an oops.
Yeah,
that's an expensive oops.
Like imagine if you like make $100,000 a year and that year you take a $280,000 401k and they send it to you you're going to roll it into an IRA or another 401k, but you send you the check, you hold it for 61 days. Your income that year is not $100,000. It's $380,000, which is an entirely different tax bracket.
Yeah. That's when you wake up and realize, I just paid stupid tax.
That was not good. Yeah, you cannot go backward in time on that one. That would be really fun, but you can't.
Yeah, that would be fun, but you can't do that. So that's
Joe,
a big deal.
Yeah, thank you so much for answering a frequently asked question.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, on the Money Pig podcast.
And we didn't talk about any bad stuff today.
No, it was actually uplifting.
I always get the what happens when bad stuff happens. I got the what happens when I got a good problem.
Come back next time for our conversation about the Widow's Guide. I'm so sorry, Joe. You're very empathetic, so it fits you, but trying to give you some happier topics. It's
Thanks.
great.
I like solving good problems.
I like it. Yeah. I like it. Hey, and remember, if you have a question, email us, moneypig@goodwininvestment.com. We will get that answer back to you. And as I like to remind people as financial advisors, we manage and balance portfolios. Manage and rebalance portfolios is really what I'm saying. But the unique value is that we work to understand our clients' individual goals so we can have these types of planning conversations that are so personal and unique to each individual. So, Joe, thanks again for being with us. And thank you for listening to the Money Pig Podcast. We'll catch you next time.
The Money Pig Podcast is hosted by Reed Trigo, a financial advisor at Goodwin Investment Advisory. This podcast is intended to share information and perspectives, but should not be interpreted as legal, financial, or tax advice. The opinions shared by participants are not necessarily endorsed by the company. Goodwin Investment Advisory is regulated by the SEC, and the company operates in compliance with applicable securities laws and regulations.